Hi, welcome to Lost in Composition. Today I'm sitting down with Eliaichi Kimaro. I said that right?
You said it right.
Okay, good. She's a film writer, filmmaker, a writer, a photographer, a painter, artist, activist, and a whole lot more.
That's a great moniker. That's awesome.
A whole lot more. So when I sat down to formulate this interview, you've had such a rich life that I didn't know where to start at all. And I was looking and looking and looking and decided to start with the word queer because it's the first word on your website after your name. So could you tell us how you decided to self-identify as queer and what that means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, you're right. I do lead off with that. So for me, I came of age in the 90s. That's when I really sort of stepped into my activism. And queer for me was the label that felt like it best aligned with how I identify. Essentially, it's just my way of saying that I am not straight. And also the gender of my partner is irrelevant to anyone but me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very true.
So like I didn't feel the need to identify as a lesbian or a bisexual. Like it was just sort of I am not straight, and the gender of my partner, not only is it like irrelevant to other people, but also it doesn't change who I am, right? So right now I'm partnered with a male-identified man, life partners, very happy. It doesn't change who I am as a person, right? Like just because I'm with someone who identifies as male doesn't all of a sudden make me straight.
Correct.
So it's just sort of like, it's my way of letting folks know, regardless of how things might look on the outside, this is how I identify on the inside.
That's cool. Yeah. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because it is, I'm gay and it's nobody's business, the gender of my spouse,
Right.
Unless I choose to make it so.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So you spent 12 years as a crisis counselor. Is it 12 or 14?
It's 12.
12.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic, and that to me is all the social service that anyone ever needs to do right there.
That's so sweet.
No, seriously, that's a lot of work, emotional, and it's just, my hat's off to you. So what was it that led you to choose that career early on?
So, I majored in school, I majored in psychology. And when I graduated, it just felt like, so I have my own personal experiences of abuse, like in relationships and also as a child. And so I just felt compelled to figure out how I could take what I now know and use it in service to, use it be of service. And so it was something I felt passionate about. It was something that I was in the middle of doing my own healing around. And so I think like a lot of folks, there's a lot of healing that goes on for yourself as you're helping to support others, you know what I mean? And so I was sort of walking that path through most of my 20s, actually. I did a lot of work with survivors of sexual abuse and dating violence, especially in communities that I was a part of, like queer communities, refugee immigrant communities, communities of color, you know what I mean? That was really my focus of like figuring out how we can build the skills we need to do to build loving and equitable and accountable communities with each other, you know what I mean? In our relationships and with each other. So,
I love that. I love that. And I love the being of service part because I believe that is key to a healthy mental and emotional life. Yeah. I really do like that a lot. So you and your husband, Tom, decided to move to Tanzania and make the movie A Lot Like You. Was this something you had thought about for a long time as you transitioned away, or was it something that was randomly spontaneous?
A little bit of both.
Cool.
It was totally a little bit of both. So Tom and I, when we started dating, my mom is from Korea and my dad is from Tanzania. But both of them have moved back to live on the same coffee farm where my dad was born and raised on Mount Kilimanjaro. So that's where they are now. And except they're there and they're everywhere because they're doing a lot of service work in Tanzania, in the East African region. And so Tom and I knew that I wanted to take Tom back to see what this whole side of my family and my life and my upbringing was about. But we wanted to, again, thinking about service, we wanted to figure out how we could do it and have it be meaningful and not just us going back and having some kind of lavish vacation and stay at resorts, you know what I mean? And visiting my parents while but actually have it be of meaning, you know? And so that idea had been there for a while, but we didn't know what it was going to look like. And then one day I was driving to work and I was listening to a mixtape that my friend sent me, dating myself, hello. And it was for my birthday, and there was a song on there that was Angelique Kidjo singing Summertime, which is actually in the beginning of the movie, where the travel montage as we go back. And as I was hearing the song for the first time, all of a sudden, all of these images came to mind of like, life back in Tanzania, you know what I mean? And so it played out in my mind almost like the traveling montage that's in the film. And so, it hit me in the span of that song that like film would be the best way to go back to Tanzania, to capture this whole culture and family, all of our stories, so that if we were to ever have kids, which we now have one, we could share it with her and help her see this too, like you're being raised in Seattle, you're being raised like in this very different world, but this too is a part of who you are, you know?
Yeah, that's really cool. So, I really like that. I can appreciate that.
Yeah, so the idea of the film came to us in a flash. The idea of going back to Tanzania for an extended period of time was something that we were nursing for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I watched the film, it became apparent that initially you weren't learning what you had set out to about the culture. And how did you come about to that realization?
It was, when we were back there, our initial goal was to go back and try to capture family stories. When we were back there, being very, very novice filmmakers, as in we had never made a film ever, what we started to notice also was that there were only trace remains of Chaga culture. My dad is from the Chaga tribe.
Yes.
And a lot of the signifiers of what that meant in my mind about capital C culture, like, you know, the songs, the dance, the ritual, the folklore, all of the, like what we're taught is culture here, that was disappearing, like with the older generation. And it wasn't being passed down to the younger generation. So then I started to feel this kind of urgency of like, I have a film camera, I have this equipment, there are elders who still have those stories, I can capture it. Like I can do what I can to sort of capture and preserve what Chaga culture has meant.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. It works in theory. It doesn't work so well in practice.
Why is that?
Because I was bringing my Western lens to what I thought Chaga culture was and what I should be pointing my camera at. You know what I mean? Like, let me see if I can try to preserve all of those things, the folklore, the dance, the traditional healing practices, you know what I mean? All of
Yeah.
And what I was getting, it just did not feel, I don't even know how to describe it. It just, I didn't feel like I was getting anything authentic because I wasn't actually authentically engaging in a curious search of trying to understand what's there. I was asking people, do you know anything about the traditional healing practices? And they're like, oh yeah, I can tell you about the traditional healing practices. I'll give you a little tour of my backyard, you know? So like it had that, you know, like, and obviously like there was, you know, I don't, like I just, it was not a very grounded exploration. You know what I mean? And we were very novice. And so we meant well, but I think we were misdirected. So what we ended up doing was like, let's just return to our initial goal of just sitting down with our family and collecting our family stories. And so that's what we did. We're like, okay, that search, we have it. We've captured some of it. There's seeds of truth in all of it. But it, like, as a whole, it wasn't amounting to what I was hoping for. But so let's just sit down with our families and just go back to that goal and see if we can capture our family stories so that we would have something tangible to pass down to our kids.
I think you did a phenomenal job of that.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's when we really got to the heart of the film, was when we actually just sat down, we stripped our superhero needs to try to capture and preserve in that Western way, and just and just like, let's just sit and be with family.
And
see
it
what comes
worked.
up.
It worked great. So throughout the film, you talk about your parents' activism. And do you think they're examples of activism and individualism and independence impacted you and helped you become the activist you are today?
Yeah, that was this is really such an interesting question, because I wouldn't have thought of it that way. And yet I think that is very true. I think it's very true. I think they have definitely raised me and my brother and my sister, like really instilled in us a sense of service and why it is important to think beyond yourselves, you
Yes.
know? And so that was one thing, like that's definitely just the culture that I was raised in. And so I think it's sort of permeated into my life. It just looks very different from what my parents are doing. They're also working, their work while they were in the US was on a more global stage. They work for branches of the United Nations, and now they're back in Tanzania, and they're like harnessing everything that they've learned to do a lot of village development work. And now they're moving out more regionally and nationally to support the service work that's happening around the country, you know?
Wow.
And so they're they've definitely instilled that value in me, but they are like, they're operating on a whole other plane.
Oh, yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Yeah. It's aspirational, you know, the work that they're doing, and it continues to inspire me. But it's like they're on another level. Yeah.
And I love the fact that 3 years after interracial marriage was made legal in the United States, they got married. That was the part in the movie that I could really relate to, because being a gay man, you know, I had been with my now husband for years, and it took us about 3 years after it became legal to get married. So obviously we weren't in any big rush, but the legal implications of that, of being married, the whole emotional and everything else aside. And when I heard that just, my heart burst. And that.
Oh, isn't that something? That like it would like. Yeah, I love that so much. I feel like, my partner and I, because I identify as queer, you know, he doesn't identify as queer, but his relationship is necessarily queered because of who he's partnered with, right?
Yeah.
And so we had a commitment ceremony, you know, I don't know, in like 2001 or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Early.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until after gay marriage became legal in Washington State.
Really
you know,
cool.
there was like an initial rush of folks who just, it really, really mattered, you know? And so we're like, we can wait until there's no line, and then we'll formalize it. So I totally, when you said that, I was like, oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels
We did
familiar.
a destination that way. We couldn't have a lot of people come.
Nice. Well played, my friend.
It's like, let's just skip.
Where did you get married?
In Kauai.
Oh, wow, yeah. Serious
on
destination.
Shipwreck Beach.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
My
lovely.
mom's like, no, not Shipwreck, that name. I'm like, no, that's where it's going to be. So, yeah. Now the movie, there's links to it below. There's links to your TED Talk. The movie itself is just an absolute work of art. And I could go on forever about it in this interview. And I don't want that to dominate the interview. So after the movie was made, you spent about a decade on the lecture circuit. What was the transition between that point in your life and becoming an artist?
There's a lot of gray period in there. So yes, I spent a lot of time on the lecture circuit. Also during this time, like we had a child. So my daughter was born in 2006. So she was born actually halfway through the time we were working on the film. While we were working on the film, I was also just a one-man band traveling around making videos for nonprofit organizations. And so I would just show up with all of my equipment and just help them like do all the filming and the editing for like a lot of the like fundraising videos that they show at their annual galas and events or things for that time web videos were becoming very popular, and so people wanted something for the website. So I did that for a while.
A lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It was a lot of hauling.
Yeah.
That really was this thing that was like that wore me down more than actually showing up and like interviewing people, and it was just being a one person one person show,
Sure.
like having to do everything was a little much. So also during that time, like there was something very appealing about photography. You know, I'm like, what about just showing up and just having a camera and then just capturing one still moment? You know what I mean? So that's when I actually started diving into photography a little bit more.
Okay.
Also because I had a kid and I was obsessed with photographing.
There you go.
And then, but the other thing about my kid is that she's a very good artist.
That's awesome.
And she's really good. And, whatever. Like we didn't realize that when she was younger. We were just drawing together and then coloring together. And then, we would... I just had a philosophy of always having art supplies out. Like if she wanted to...
I love that.
Yeah, and then like also having a philosophy of I'm not going to fuss about a mess. You know what I mean? I don't want her to be sort of like, if she wants to create with finger paint, like I want her to just do it. We can wash everything off afterwards. It's not a problem. So I would she just always had constant access to art supplies. And I would just watch her go. And she was just fearless. She could create anything that she had in her mind because no one had told her that she couldn't.
Yes. Parents, take note.
No one told her that she couldn't. And I stopped making art when I was in 4th grade, right? Because like a lot of people, in my mind, as a 4th grader, being an artist meant you could draw. I can't draw, still to this day. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm like, so I'm not an artist. So I'll just look at other things. I did music, I did other things, but I didn't do art. So, but like doing art alongside my kid, she just made it look so fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that it was infectious and I just wanted to do it and I wanted to do more. We started watching videos. We started making cards, you know what I mean? And like pop-up cards and like getting really creative. And then she went off to school and I was just like, there's something here. And I knew that feeling, right? So like, it's like having like when I had the idea for the film and it wouldn't let me go because they're like, there's something in here that wants to come out and this is the medium. And you need to see this through. Yeah. So I had that same feeling coming up in terms of like with the art. And so I took an encaustic class and I found my people. And there was a beautiful encaustic studio that was in West Seattle for a long time. It was run by this teacher, Sean Dahl, and it was the Northwest Encaustic Studio. And I just signed up for a class and I actually started my Instagram on that day.
Oh, wow.
Because I'm like, I wonder how long it will take for me to be able to produce the work that I have in my mind. You know what I mean? Like, because if you ever have the time to scroll all the way back to the start of my Instagram, I will tell you that there is no talent there. There's no talent.
That's fine.
And so I am not a believer in talent, except for when I have a situation like my daughter who defies explanation, then I sort of have to figure out, I don't know what that is, but I don't have it. You know what I mean?
I totally understand.
And so it's just a matter of just showing up and just being curious. And what I learned from filmmaking, I've been able to apply a lot of sort of the meta lessons about moving my film out into the world, into my art world. So now I just have a lot more patience. I don't have a lot of urgency. I don't have a need to knock down doors and be seen or acknowledged or validated by people outside of myself. You know what I mean? I just go where the energy is.
Cool.
And in the meantime, I just show up in my studio every day and I do the work.
Very cool. So I want to go back to the photography really quick because prior to this, you said it was a form of meditation for you. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think especially after the filmmaking, I just feel like everything sort of slows down when I'm doing photography. And it's about sort of just noticing what I notice and learning how to see. And it really is about it all happens in a moment. Which you can't say about filmmaking. This is many, 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 many moments, strung together. But it's just for just there was something about the stillness, the silence, also of photography, and just trying to capture it as best as I could. Whether it was something that was fast and action and emotion, or if it was like a close up of something like a rusty object, or it was arresting, and and it's a still, quiet image.
I love that, because when you told me that, I could relate, because I took a couple of photography classes when I was younger, and I loved it, and I still do. It's nothing, it's more of a hobby. And,
Yeah, exactly.
that type of thing. But you've had bands and...
Well, I did some photography. I was really into photography when we were coming out with the soundtrack for the film. So that was one big thing, was that the composing team for my film was Pete Droge and Elaine Summers, and they really they gave me the great pleasure of coming and just sort of having a whole day of playing with Pete in the studio, and like just sort of getting these close-ups and delicious shots of him in the studio that we ended up using as the inner album sleeve of the soundtrack. And so that was one thing. And then I did a lot of sort of portraits and other photographs of like other musicians, and coming out and doing live shows and some things like that. But yeah, so it was just, but it was 100% a hobby. It was just a fun outlet.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I really liked your response. That's why I wanted to touch base on that.
Oh, so sweet.
So when you paint, you do both acrylics and oils, and you also use cold wax and mixed media. Is that a search for a medium, or is that an established medium? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So I think, honestly, I think I'm addicted to beginner's brain. You know what I mean? Like, I am addicted, because I love having no expectations of what I should be capable of. There's something that's very liberating about that. There's no expectations that you should be able to make.
I wish I could get there all the time.
But there's just no expectation. It's like you're totally freed up of needing to expect that you're going to make a masterpiece, because you're learning something new. You know what I mean? Learning and understanding the materiality of what you're working with, and how it can be combined with the other things that you've already learned how to use, and how can you add this to your toolbox? Yeah. How can it's endlessly fascinating. And like the way I started with film and then I moved to photography, it's a little bit backward. Like, I learned about composition and framing and everything with a moving image before I went and I did it with photography, and everything was still, right? And so similarly with the artwork, I started with encaustic, which is a very complex form of art making. You know what I mean? Like, that has to do with like molten beeswax and building your work up in layers, and it's a very involved. And then I realized that I could combine that with oil, so I started using more oil painting in my work. And then during quarantine, I started painting with acrylics for the first time.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is so great. It dries so quickly. There are no fumes. My whole family can be at home, and it doesn't really matter, you know? And so now I'm like mixing oils and acrylics and playing around with that a little bit more. So it's and I'm always in search of the next thing that I can start incorporating. I'm going to start drawing probably a little bit more soon, and seeing how I can incorporate that into my work. And
very cool.
Yeah, so we'll see.
I love the beginner's brain.
Yeah, beginner's brain is everything.
That's awesome. It's very true.
Yeah. Very
true. So in your bio for the Columbia City Gallery, it says that you love stories that hold scars. And your work has a weathered element to it. Most of it has a weathered element to it.
Yeah.
Do your work start with a scar?
Not literally, no. I mean, I think I just start my works and is playing for the most part. And then things start to sort of take shape. I just work very intuitively. It isn't until I'm pretty far along in the process that I start to think about what's emerging. What is this piece about? What does it want to be? What is it telling me? You know? And as I'm sort of getting to know this piece that's emerging, that's when I start sort of maybe reading into it, maybe working into it after the fact. Like the stories, it's not so much the scars, it's like the stories of survival and strength and resilience that I feel like comes out in my work quite a bit. Like this piece here on the base, like on the foundation level, I should have shown this to you before. Maybe we'll talk about it more later, but it's all the transcripts.
Talk about it now.
It's all the transcripts from the film. And so I have my aunt's stories are in here, and you can make out some of the transcripts if you look really closely. Like all the yellow little stuff that's peeking out is all like the transcripts. So the story of my whole family is in here, and then there's an image up there that you can barely make out, which is my mom and her brother at the beach when they were really young. Cool. You know what I mean? Like so, like there's just. I
did not know that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And this is one of your favorite pieces, correct?
It is one of my favorite pieces. Yeah, it is. There's a lot more to this piece than meets the eye. Mm-hmm. And I'll share an image of this as just the raw transcripts. I'll show that to you a little bit later, and so you can see it. But yeah, so there's just a lot of family history, my own personal stories, my journal pages, where I'm working stuff out that is just embedded in my work. And so it's more like in that way that the stories that scars hold. And also like just, I love weathered surfaces. Like they all look scarred. You know what I mean? Like they all look like they've lived many lives and they have a lot of stories to tell, you know?
I have a really contrasting thing. I either like weathered things or very pristine.
Yes.
I don't know what that is.
I'm starting to realize that too. A lot of my work that's coming out now is very pristine, and it's just recent, you know. But I haven't been able to do pristine in a way that feels like it reflects me. Like, and the thing is, like pristine. I'm looking at pieces like that is like a little bit cleaner and brighter, but still weathered. You know what I mean? But like but even like the hashtag piece. You know what I mean? Like it's very it's different for me. It's a departure, and it's exciting because I think that there's something there to be mined. So again, beginner's brain.
Yeah. So one thing that as I was preparing for this interview, I would look at your art and think about your history, and you've seen a lot of pain and disparity and injustice. And I love that your work is not filled with dark imagery, because it's very human, I think. It's not what I would expect from somebody who has seen and experienced so much in life.
Right.
And do you think that you've been able to bypass the dark stuff by getting intimate with your demons in therapy and shining light on them with discussion?
That is, I've been thinking a lot about that. I think if I started making art in my 20s, it would have looked very different. You know what I mean? I think I would have been working through a lot more stuff then. I feel like now in my 50s, I feel like there's a lot of the demons and the struggle and the shame and the pain has been worked through and digested. And so this is now what's coming out, And so all the story and the struggle is still in there, but that's not what the work is about necessarily. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, but I feel like if I had access to art when I was younger, it would have gone through. You would have seen the journey a lot more. Yeah,
it's funny because when you said that, Basquiat came to mind for some reason.
Yeah, that's really it's really true. I think a lot of my activism, my just social and political awakening, it would have materialized a lot more. Yeah, and just working through the injustice and just sort of my own experiences of racism and, homophobia and sexism, all that stuff would have, like, the anger that resulted from that, the righteous anger that resulted from that would have shown up more in my work. But I feel like I use my work now to digest those experiences. You know what I mean? Like creating art is how I sort of process all of that stuff, whether it's through writing, and then the writing ends up in my paintings, and the painting, and just showing up and painting my truth every day. It just sort of, it works itself out. You know what I mean? And in the end of the day, this is what I'm left with.
Cool. And so what are a couple of your favorite pieces and why?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, this one, I have to say this one surprised me. I do love this piece quite a bit because it it is an embodiment of the film and my film journey in art form.
Yes.
You know, like
Yeah. Quite literally.
very literally. Yeah, more literally than others. Like the piece that's behind you over there, that piece is called Where I Begin. And that piece to me is about the stories that I've inherited, and the stories that I'm passing down. And the line that exists in that piece is sort of where I started. Like the everything below it is like it's sort of like where roots, turn into shoots,
Okay.
And so
Yep.
so it's just sort of like and just sort of locating myself in that crossover between cultural inheritance and legacy, Yeah. So, and I think there's a piece that's over there. It looks like a red pipeline.
Yeah.
It's called When We Were One. And that piece reminds me of being pregnant with my daughter. And, there's a little bit of a larger story, but I had this really cool pregnancy book that told you week by week what was happening,
Oh, that's cool.
in terms of what was being produced, and if you're having a boy, this is happening. If you're having a girl, this is happening, and this is the size of the thing. So there was one week where I read, if you are having a girl, you are in this week making all the eggs that girl will carry.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I took that week off. Very literally. I'm like, dude, I am making my I'm making my descendants this week.
Yep.
So I am going to chill. Yep. I am laying a lot of eggs and I need to relax.
I'm not doing nothing. Netflix is my friend.
Yes. And only relaxing Netflix,
Yeah.
So it was a really intense thing to realize, like that whole thing about intergenerational trauma is really real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so and knowing everything that I know about trauma and I was just really thinking about oh my goodness, in this week I am making the seeds of individuals who I may never have a chance to meet.
Yeah.
But they're forming now. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it was just sort of, that's what the bloodlines that connect us all is sort of what that piece is about. And there's little images in there that are sort of abstracted DNAs, and you know what I mean? It's just sort of.
Yeah. I'll be sure to post that piece.
Yeah. So that one is that's a piece that I love.
Cool. Very cool. And who are some of your favorite artists and why?
Oh my goodness. There's so many artists. There's the artists who are in Seattle. We are so lucky to be living in a city that is so alive with the most amazing artists. World class.
So underrated.
World-class artists.
Yep.
So I feel incredibly lucky and blessed to just happen to be making art at a time when there are just so many amazing artists in Seattle.
Yeah, there are.
Then there's the artists who I look to who inspire me, like Paul Klee and Richard Diebenkorn and Mark Bradford and there's so many, Doho Suh. So there's a lot of living artists and then artists who came before who I love their work. I don't look at their work and necessarily I don't look to their work for inspiration, but I enjoy resting with their work,
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's completely fair. Now, when I asked that question, I was kind of surprised that Bowie never came out.
Oh, musicians.
It doesn't matter. Artist
Dude,
is artist.
Shame on me.
Like Bowie, come on.
I love that you said that because that means you're associating me with Bowie, and I'm very flattered because that is 100% true. Oh, yeah. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm touching the mic. That might.
No, that's fine.
But yeah. Oh, artists. Oh, dude, that's a bigger question. I should have thought of that.
No, that's okay. It's the standard canned response that I would expect from an artist.
Right. Oh yeah. And then there's also writers. This is actually something that I really, really love, and is something that I'm thinking about as I move forward. I was so grateful for all the people that I was able to collaborate with on my film, right?
Yeah.
The musicians, the colorists, the animators, the illustrators.
Oh my God, I never even
the editors.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All these people brought their master craftsmanship, and in service to my film, to help me tell my story, right?
Yeah.
And so now I have this medium, I'm working in this medium that I'm realizing I can bring and make of service to other people's stories. So I'm starting to find different ways of doing that now. Like I have a piece that is going to be the book cover of a collection of poetry by Suzanne Edison that's going to be coming out. You know, I have artworks and art pieces that are backdrops and set design in a friend's movie that's going to be coming out shortly. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just sort of like, oh, like I am kicking myself for not thinking more broadly about how you define artists, because I'm thinking about collaborating with artists across disciplines now with my art and bringing my art to yeah. So that's something that I'm kind of is on my horizon. I think I'm going to look for more and more opportunities to do that.
Well, you kind of answered my next question, which was if there were any call outs for creative folks. Do you have any that you'd like to specifically call out, or?
You know what? There's
too many.
There's a little bit too many. There are people though who I just personally like. Like there's people like Juan Alonso Rodriguez, who is just I admire how he moves through the world.
I do too. And he is on the slate to be interviewed.
Fantastic.
Yes,
fantastic. Yeah. I just, he's just full of grace. And
he is.
And when I hear how he talks about his work, the level of intention that he brings to his work, to his practice, to his life, to how he mentors other people, to his service and what he does for the arts community in Seattle, I have nothing but I hold him in the highest regard.
I do too. Juan, did you hear that?
It's true.
Yep.
So,
is there any kind of advice or life tips that you'd like to give? Or you've already given a lot.
I've already given a lot. I think really, let me think about how I could say this. I don't believe that art is the purview of a precious few. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's so many different ways in which people creatively express themselves. Whether it's art, whether it's cooking, whether it's gardening, whether it's design, whether it is fashion, like, you know what I mean? Like there's just sewing, knitting, there's things that people do all the time that is their way of creatively expressing themselves. And I feel like it can be very easy to think that there's some kind of threshold beyond which you can call yourself an artist, you know?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I am not a fan of that.
I can really appreciate that because I don't consider myself an artist. Whereas time and time again, I'm told, look around your house, you are an artist.
Yeah.
You may collect, but the way you've decorated, the way you've painted your house, the way you've done the exterior is just, it's a work of art. And I'm like, well, thank you, whatever. But
right. Yeah. But I there's just so many different ways that people, I don't know, like I haven't formulated it in a way that is necessarily, I just want to encourage people to find whatever way they can to
adopt beginner's brain.
Yeah, adopt beginner's brain. Yeah. This started from all of my things, whether it's like film, the film I worked on or painting, like it's just all just because I had the curiosity to ask myself, what happens if I do this? Or, or there's like a little seed of like something that wanted to just sort of be expressed. And so I just really encourage people to find the thing that turns you on and do that.
Very cool.
Yeah, with vigor. Yeah.
Yes, with vigor. Yep.
Yeah.
I love that. So I'd like to thank you immensely. I have been looking forward to this interview for some time now.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for all that you are doing to champion art and artists in the Seattle community. I'm so grateful for you.
Hopefully outside the Seattle community soon.
That'll be awesome.
Yeah, that will be awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you again. And thank you for tuning in. There are links to the items that we discussed below. And please like the video and follow me on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you.